There are two versions of the United States, the one you see in movies, in speeches, in textbooks, and the one that lives inside the data. Every single image you just saw tells a true story and hides a bigger one. We're not here to argue with the images. We're here to read what's underneath them. We're data dark, and we only speak in numbers. Before we start, a deal. Every number in this video comes from a government database, a peer-reviewed study, or a major institution. Nothing is invented. Nothing is exaggerated. If you disagree with a statistic, the source is in the description. Go check it. We don't have opinions here. We have data. What you do with it, that's entirely up to you. Number 1. The wealth illusion. Statistic number 1. The United States has a higher wealth inequality rate than Russia. Let that sit for a second. Not higher than a struggling country. Higher than Russia, a country we've been told for decades represents everything we're not. You've probably heard the number before. The top 1% owns more than the bottom half of the country combined. But here's what they don't tell you about that number. It's not getting better. The gap has widened every single decade since the 1970s, through Democratic presidents, Republican presidents, boom years, and recessions. And here's the part that might make you uncomfortable. The median household net worth in the United States is reported at $192,000. That sounds like a lot. Sounds like prosperity. That number is a lie. Not a deliberate lie, a mathematical one. That number is the average, and a handful of billionaires are pulling it up so far that the actual middle, the real median, is closer to $97,000. For Black American households, that number is $34,000, one emergency away from zero. The American dream is mathematically real for about 10% of people born into it. The other 90% aren't failing. They're playing a game where the rules were written before they arrived. Number 2, the healthcare trap. Statistic number 2. The United States spends more on healthcare per person than any country on Earth, and gets some of the worst outcomes in the developed world. Not bottom of the world, bottom of the rich world. That's a specific kind of failure. $13,000 per person per year. That's what America spends. Germany spends half that, and their doctors will see you the same week. Japan spends a third of that and lives 4 years longer than the average American. The question isn't whether the money exists. $13,000 per person is an extraordinary amount of money. The question is, where does it go?
There's been a lot of news reports about a Commonwealth Fund report that went out. This report called Mirror 2024 was just released, and it compares the U.S. healthcare system to 9 other high-income countries' healthcare system. Spoiler alert, news isn't great for America. I've been on this rant about this, over the last 20 years. Yeah. At the margin, we've spent, I estimate, maybe $16 trillion more above and beyond what we were spending. That is, we're throwing additional money into the healthcare system. By the way, inflation adjusted, $16 trillion more. And so despite spending more money on healthcare than any other country in the world, the U.S. ranks dead last when it comes to key measures like health equity, access to care, overall health outcomes. That means on average, Americans live shorter and sicker lives than people in countries like Australia, the UK, Netherlands. Now I've heard people say, but that's not everybody. If you're wealthy in this country, you live well. First of all, that's part of the problem.
A life expectancy of 76.4 years. That ranks the United States 46th in the world, below Slovenia, below Cuba. Not because Americans are less healthy by nature, because the system that's supposed to keep them alive is structured around something other than keeping them alive. A 2023 Commonwealth Fund report ranked the U.S. healthcare system last among the world's 10 wealthiest nations in overall performance, outcomes, and equity. Dead last, while spending the most. We're not going to tell you why. We're going to give you the number, and we're going to let you ask the right questions. Number 3, the debt nobody talks about. Statistic number 3. Every American citizen, man, woman, and newborn baby, currently owes over $100,000 as their personal share of the national debt. You didn't sign anything. You didn't vote for it. You were born into it. $34 trillion. That's 34 followed by 12 zeros. If you stacked $100 bills, not spread them, stacked them, $34 trillion would reach the moon and back, 4 times. And here's the part that nobody on TV will mention. There is currently no plan to pay it back. None. The debate in Washington is whether to slow how fast it grows, not how to reduce it.
Whenever the U.S. government needs money, it raises that money through the issuing of savings bonds or treasury bonds. These bonds are basically pieces of paper that say the U.S. will pay the person or agency that buys it back with a little bit of interest. Many people want to buy bonds because they're pretty solid investments, like banks, foreign governments, and maybe even you. The debt ceiling, which you may have heard about, is actually the cap that is set on what the U.S. Treasury can issue in terms of bonds. Congress will raise the debt ceiling to finance government spending through the sale of more of these treasuries. With those basics out of the way of how the government is funded, who actually owns all of these bonds? No, it's not really one of our enemies or some secret super powerful group. Foreign governments and investors only own about 30% of overall US debt, whereas the remaining 70% is either held by US investors, the Federal Reserve, or even the US government itself. U.S. investors, like banks, institutions, and regular people, own about 33% of the total debt. The Federal Reserve, or the U.S.'s privatized central bank, owns about 12% of the total debt. The U.S. government itself actually owns roughly 27% of total debt. That may not make a lot of sense, but this is essentially agencies like Social Security, Medicare, and disability insurance buying up debt from the U.S. Treasury and using interest payments on that debt to fund their own programs. Normally, you couldn't loan yourself some money, but in the case of governments that print the currency, they actually can. The remaining roughly 28 to 30% of debt is owned by foreign investors, the largest being China and Japan, but Brazil, Ireland, and the UK are other big purchasers. Investing in US treasuries allow these countries to control their currency value in relation to the US dollar, which can be beneficial for trade and other monetary policy. So, who does the US owe money to? Well, largely its own people, companies, and even itself.
For the first time in American history, the interest payments on this debt, just the interest, are now the single largest line item in the entire federal budget. Bigger than the military, bigger than Social Security for the next year. The United States is paying, right now, more to service its debt than it spends protecting its citizens. The numbers don't care about politics, they just keep running. This number will be larger by the time this video ends. It grows by roughly $2 million every minute. Number 4, the education lie. Statistic number 4. A college degree in the United States is now statistically more likely to hurt you financially than to help you. We know that sounds extreme. The data doesn't care. The average student loan debt for a graduating senior is $37,000. That's just for a bachelor's degree. For graduate degrees, $80,000. Medical or law school, past $200,000, before you earn your first dollar in your chosen field. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve found that roughly 40% of recent college graduates are working in jobs that don't require a degree at all. You borrowed $37,000. To get a job, a high school diploma could have gotten you.
Well, this is a for-profit group, and it's a number of different colleges that comprise that group. These students are alleging fraud, and that's very important. They're saying not only did the school promise us that we get a good education, and it was a shabby one, they also said we get great job placement, and they kind of hoodwinked us into getting student loans, which there was no way that we could repay. They're relying on a little-known part of the Department of Education, Higher Education Act, which says if there's fraud, students can discharge this debt. Why do you think this story is so interesting? Well, I think what it raises is this larger issue of student loan debt. Now, what we know is there's about $1.2 trillion of outstanding student loans. Now, most of these are federal loans, but these loans are notoriously difficult to discharge, even in cases of bankruptcy. You think you declare bankruptcy and you wipe the slate clean? Not so. What's interesting about this case, Corinthian colleges actually used bankruptcy law to their advantage to get the government to kind of help bail them out, but the students had no recourse, and I think that paradox is a very interesting one.
But they were already under investigation by the Department of Education.
Yes,
Why?
and so they were under investigation for some of these practices, and what these Corinthian 100 is actually saying is, hey, government, you knew that there was an investigation pending, you never should have let us take these loans out, and as a result, because you knew that and you didn't disclose it, you've got to discharge this $3.3 million of loans that we are due.
The Brookings Institution found that over 40% of student loan borrowers are either in default or behind on payments within 5 years of graduation. Within 5 years, while the loans are still growing. And college enrollment has dropped for 8 consecutive years. Not because education became less important, because millions of young Americans looked at the math and did the math. We want to be clear. Education is not the problem. Learning is not the problem. The structure built around it, the debt, the gatekeeping, the credential inflation, that's a different system entirely. One worth examining. The kids are already examining it. Number 5. The loneliness epidemic. Statistic number 5. The United States Surgeon General declared loneliness a national epidemic in 2023. Not a trend, not a social issue, an epidemic, using the same language we use for diseases that kill people, because loneliness is killing people. A Harvard study found that 36% of all Americans, including 61% of young adults, reported feeling serious loneliness, not occasional, serious, chronic. The CDC confirms the health impact of loneliness is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. We don't talk about loneliness like we talk about cigarettes, but biologically, the damage is the same.
This is a problem that has been building for decades in our country. COVID certainly worsened it. It poured fuel on the fire, but that fire was burning before. And as the world has moved faster and faster, as things have changed so much, as we now move around a lot, we change jobs a lot, how we communicate with one another has changed and often shifted from in-person to online. A lot of that together has actually taken a toll on our relationships. And now we're realizing that we've got to be intentional about rebuilding those relationships because they have a profound effect both on our mental health and our physical health.
That's the Surgeon General talking about loneliness, and to discuss this further, let's bring in clinical psychologist Dr. Jeff Gardier. Doctor, this advisory comes on the heels of a New York Times op-ed written by the Surgeon General, and it was titled, "We have become a lonely nation. It's time to fix that." You know, I'm just stumped. Why? You know, what's your take on this, and what's your biggest concern about it? I didn't think America was a fragmented, fractured, lonely country. People were, you know, in all kinds of groups. We were famous as a nation of joiners, and now it seems we're staying alone. What's going on?
So, Terry, as you alluded to earlier, and as Dr. Murthy had talked about, really the pandemic has lifted the curtain on many of our social ills. And one of those ills was the fact, because of social media, because of the internet, we were certainly becoming a society that was very much insulated, focusing just on ourselves. Many of our activities were online, and we were starting to lose that human connection. Now we find that with the pandemic, since we were even more isolated, that loneliness has become an after effect of the COVID-19 pandemic. And now loneliness is an epidemic of its own. We're seeing a 50% increase in the risk of developing dementia for older adults, 29% increase in the risk of heart disease, 32% increase in the risk of stroke, premature death up by more than 60%, and certainly more depression. These are the things that are telling us, Terry, more than anything else, that as social animals, as human beings, that we need to be connected. Our evolution is about relying on one another, and we're losing that connection, and it's having deleterious effects.
The United States now has the highest rate of people living alone of any major country. Nearly 30% of all households, one person, four walls, no one to call. This is the most technologically connected generation in human history. They have more ways to reach people than any humans who have ever lived. and they report having fewer close friends than any generation since we started measuring. Somehow, the most connected country in history became the loneliest. We're not going to tell you why smartphones cause loneliness or why working from home isolates people. Those are conversations happening everywhere. We're going to give you the number. 61% of young Americans feel seriously lonely. Not sometimes, seriously, chronically. That's not a personal problem. That's a structural one. Number 6. The food system. Statistic number 6. Over 60% of the American diet consists of ultra-processed food, the highest percentage of any developed nation. We're not talking about processed food, canned tomatoes, frozen vegetables. Ultra-processed, industrial formulations designed in laboratories to override your body's ability to stop eating. The CDC reports that 74% of American adults are overweight or obese. And here's the detail that makes this statistic different from a personal health story. The United States Department of Agriculture, the government agency, actively subsidizes the exact industries that produce the food most linked to those conditions. Corn syrup, refined grains, industrial seed oils. The same government that runs public health campaigns about obesity is paying for the ingredients that cause it.
So what does this study tell us about our consumption of ultra-processed foods? So the CDC study found that the average American adult gets more than half of their calories from ultra-processed foods, and it's even higher for kids and teens, over 60%. And what are some of the common foods that are driving this? Sandwiches, which actually surprised me. Yeah, me too. Baked goods, snacks, and sodas, sugary beverages. So the key thing to get across here is this is not just about looking good and losing weight to fit into that dress. This actually has very real health impacts. So in addition to obesity, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, stroke, kidney disease, cancer, the list goes on and on. Well, and we've had discussions before. You know, I'm going to out myself. I do consume ultra-processed foods in the form of energy drinks. And if we know it's so bad for us, why do so many of us continue to do it? Look, these are foods that are cheap. They're convenient. You can find them everywhere. And on top of that, they're engineered to be addictive with the salt, sugar, fat, and also certain sensory tricks like how those chips sound or how something smells. And so it's really meant to hijack the part of your brain that craves certain foods. And I just want to go back to the health piece of what the majority of eating unprocessed foods, because you talked a little bit about some of the things like cardiovascular disease, but dive a little bit more into the weight piece of it. So there was a recent study out of the UK looking at people who had a diet of ultra-processed foods and was improved to help them lose weight versus people who were having largely whole foods, homemade foods. And what they found is both groups did lose weight, but the group that was getting homemade foods lost twice as much. So what this really tells us is it's not just about the nutrients, because the nutrients, you know, the vitamins, the proteins, the fiber were the same actually, but it's that the processing itself is driving some of the weight gain.
A 2021 JAMA study found that poor diet is now the leading cause of death in the United States, surpassing tobacco, surpassing alcohol, surpassing cardiovascular disease as a standalone cause. The food isn't killing you by accident. It is designed to be irresistible. It is subsidized to be cheap. It is marketed to children before they can read. The system works exactly as intended. 6 numbers in. 6 systems that, when you look at the data, don't quite add up the way we were told they should. We told you at the beginning that number 7 would stop us cold. We meant it. Number 7, the one that stopped us cold. Statistic number 7. The United States incarcerates more of its own citizens than any country on earth, including every authoritarian government we've ever been told to fear, including China, a country with 4 times the population and officially no democracy. With just 4% of the world's population, the United States holds 20% of the world's prisoners. Over 2 million Americans are currently behind bars, not counting those on parole, not counting pre-trial detention, just incarcerated. That's more than China, more than Russia, more than any country, anywhere, at any point in recorded history.
When it comes to being the world's biggest jailer, 2.2 million people are imprisoned in the US, more than in any country in the world. More than even China, who dwarfs us population-wise. When you count the people who aren't just incarcerated but on probation or parole, the number skyrockets to 6.9 million. That's 1 in 35 American adults caught up in the prison system. And for people of color, it's even worse. 1 out of every 3 African American men born today will go to jail or prison at some point in their lives. But why? How did the so-called land of the free put so many of its own citizens behind bars? If you think it was always like this, it wasn't. Back in the 1960s, our incarceration rates were the same as Europe's. And if you think there's just more crime here, that's not true either. Our crime rates are pretty much on par with the rest of the Western world. I asked Alicia Santo, a staff writer at the Marshall Project, for some insight.
The reason that America has the highest incarceration rate, to put it simply, is tough on crime policies. Over the past few decades, a number of very harsh policies have been enacted in state and federal legislatures. A lot of these had to do with longer sentences. Some of these had to do with so-called 3 strikes laws, which basically said that if you got in trouble 3 times, you had to be in prison, regardless often of how petty those crimes were.
Here's the statistic inside the statistic. The American prison system is, at this point, an $80 billion a year industry. $80 billion. Many of the largest facilities are run by private corporations. Those corporations profit directly when more Americans go to prison. And those companies write checks to the politicians who write the laws that determine who goes to prison. Let that sentence resolve in your mind before we continue. This isn't a conspiracy theory. Lobbying records are public. Campaign finance records are public. Prison contracts are public. The profit margins of private prison corporations are public. It's a business model. It's in the annual reports, and almost nobody is talking about it, until now. Well, 7 numbers. Wealth inequality higher than Russia. Healthcare spending with the outcomes of a developing nation. $34 trillion with no plan. College debt outpacing the jobs it unlocks. A loneliness epidemic declared by the government itself. A food system subsidized to make you sick. And more people behind bars than any country in human history. These aren't opinions. Every statistic in this video came from government databases, peer-reviewed research, and major institutions. Links in the description. Check them yourself. We want you to check them. The question isn't whether these numbers are real. They are. The question is, why aren't they in every conversation, every classroom, every front page? That's the question Data Dark exists to ask. Well, see you in the next video.